Thank you for tuning in to Tamara for Georgia. I am Tamara Johnson Shealey, your candidate for the United States Senate. I'm an independent Democrat that believes that reparations will make America great. It is time that we unite our country once and for all. Please go to my website. It's tamaraforgeorgia.com. And please join me every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here for Tamara for Georgia. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm excited, y'all. We're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about feeding ourselves. We're going to talk about being self-sustaining. Y'all, we got to start looking at things a lot differently. So I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. I have a great guest with me this morning, and we're going to talk about aquaponics and how we can feed ourselves. That's the kind of world we're living in right here, right now. So Mr. Schaefer has joined me with Schaefer Global. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Tamara. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you? Out and about?
Out and about. Yes, this is my, I don't know, people mobile these days. I don't know, everybody working virtually and what have you. And so my car is my office. It's all the things that you would think about.
You know, my home is my office. My car is my office. And I kind of like it that way. Honestly, I don't want to be trapped in a building all day. So I'm appreciating how we are mobile and virtual right now.
Absolutely. And it really brings the world into context, especially when people are talking about COVID and things like that, and they compare it to the Spanish flu. And you think about what the world looked like back when the Spanish flu was ticking off and how it took 2 years for the Spanish flu to spread the globe and take out about half the planet in the process, and how quickly COVID spreads the world now with access across the world and things like that. And so that's the kind of basis, how the world looks now, and bring that into the conversation about food.
Yeah. And I can appreciate, the fact that we're outside, you're outside, you're not in an enclosed space, and this is where we are. So I'm liking it.
Either this or sitting in the backyard, but since it's 32 degrees right now, it's probably not a good idea for me to be sitting in the backyard.
Well, it's probably close to that here in Georgia. You are in what state?
I'm in Virginia, in the U.S., for those folks internationally.
Yeah, I am here in Georgia and it's cold. So if it's 40 degrees, it's freezing to us. It's
Well,
cold.
yeah, the cold wave went all the way down to Georgia and Texas, and it's been a little crazy this winter.
Yeah, but I think we need it, because there's a season where we need the cold weather to kill off bacteria, kill off germs. It's good for the soil. And I'm gonna let you get into aquaponics. Aquaponics, Mr. Aquaponics himself, Schaefer Global. Start with telling us how you even got into this.
Oh my Lord. So that's almost like a spiritual journey here. To tell that conversation. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, northern Iowa. Part of the land was actually in Minnesota. So my family immigrated. So we're immigrants here in the United States. I think I'm fourth generation immigrant in the United States. So nobody can really claim, except for maybe the American Indians, the Native American Indians that were here before everybody else. But they immigrated too, didn't they? And so my family homesteaded during the Homestead Act back in 1868, some land in Iowa. And that's where we got our start. They were farmers. Schaefer in German means shepherd. The Irish side of the family came from Ireland during when England was trying to enslave the Irish and send them down to the islands and stuff. And so they homesteaded. We got started farming. They expanded. My dad expanded, bought some more land. So we're sitting on almost 500 acres in Iowa, and doing the traditional industrial ag with a lot of tractors, combines, grain bins, fossil fuel usage, heavy chemical usage, all of those factors in play. So I'm very aware of the industrial type commercial agriculture industry and how that all works. And so aquaponics to me, I was doing a koi fish pond business. If you're not familiar with what koi fish ponds are, so getting involved in the koi fish pond business taught me the balance of the plants and the fish and the whole chemistry, what happens in the water, and the need for a biological filtration system to sustain that whole ecosystem because you're creating a living ecosystem for the plants, the fish, and whatever else you throw in that water environment, like turtles or whatever, snails and things like that. And so that brought me to aquaponics when a friend of a friend of a friend, get that, asked if anybody knew anything about aquaponics. And at that point, I really didn't. And I just had my koi pond business to go off of. So I did a little research. And I said, well, that's easy enough. I can figure that out. No problem. Go figure. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation. They presented it. A bunch of chancellors from Nigeria came over for this sustainability conference. They loved it. And so it went from there. I got an opportunity after that in 2015 to build the system for the University of the District of Columbia and teach their certification program. I'm now with Bowie State University. I built their system. I'm teaching their program. We're going to be expanding that to a larger greenhouse space. Working on a few education committees, agriculture education committees in the state of Maryland to build a education pathways program around aquaponics from K through 16, including the schools, high schools, community colleges, universities, all of that, to allow students the opportunity to end that whole path with a certification, a degree, earning a living wage in aquaponics, or if they choose to go hydroponics or whatever, that's their choice. But at least they understand the science. Because if you look at the industry of aquaponics, when you take things to a larger commercial scale, when we talk about scalability, I'll talk about that next. But the failure rate in commercial scale aquaponics, when people try to take it to a large commercial scale, is pretty high in the 75 percentile range. And why? In my opinion, why is because they failed to understand the science behind the system. They try to take something they do on a very small scale and take it to a very big scale. It may work on a small scale for what they're doing, but when you now take it to a larger scale, you're dealing with much more bigger complexities, and your failure rate in your the disruptions and the things that go wrong with the system are much bigger and enhanced.
Well, let's break
Um,
that all down because that was a mouthful. So I'm gonna go back.
yes.
He says he loves hydroponics, and we'll get into hydroponics in just a bit as well. But just so those of you who are watching didn't get triggered, I know. Let me correct Mr. Mr. Schaefer with those of us who are descendants of chattel slavery and Native Americans. So make sure that for those, I didn't want y'all to be triggered because I know it's podcast and I know where a lot of us are with the reparations movement. So we won't go there today. We're going to talk about food and feeding ourselves and how we have something very sustainable as we move into this age of technology, where technology and agriculture has married itself, and it has to marry itself, because how do we feed the world's population? How do we feed ourselves? So we're embarking upon something very different, because I grew up, I tell you all the time, my grandmother had a farm. Whatever we ate for snack is what came out of that damn yard. That was our snack. And if I had a chance to go to the gas station or the grocery store and I got a bag of chips and a soda, that was like, oh my gosh, it was amazing to have that kind of treat, because we ate off the land. And that's how I grew up. And that's how I, even to this day, how I live. I am very intentional about foods and what I'm putting in my body and where these foods are actually coming from. So aquaponics, to go back to what it is this balance again, what I think I'm learning, and I've learned a lot from you, Mr. Schaefer. So I appreciate all that you're teaching me in this arena. But what I think I understand about aquaponics is that it truly is a balance between the nature of the soil and water and fish and animals that reside in these waters, and that balance. And it takes me back to high school science class, where they were teaching us like the periodic table, and they were teaching us like, you know, we were dissecting animals. It takes me back to that very elementary learning. So I wanted this broadcast to be on that scale, because for many of us, all of this is new information.
No, that's perfect. And not to shy away from what you said, we're going to not avoid. So let's
Don't
let
go there,
you
Mr.
know
Schaefer.
there.
I'm telling you, they'll shut us down today.
Well, no, this is a great segue for that, because we talk about justice. We talk about food justice. This technology levels the playing field for anybody who wants to do it, whether they want to do it in their basement, their backyard, they want to get involved in a local business, they want to form a cooperative, they want to do it on a larger scale out in the rural area where they got space to expand. It really levels the playing field for everyone involved. So those opportunities are there, and the funding now with the U.S. Department of Agriculture targeting the disadvantaged or groups and populace and demographics and all of those things is really helping the Black community and others really take this opportunity and run with it. And we're trying to also build in the education programs to make sure we train people properly so they have the foundation for success. And outside of the science behind it for agriculture, there's also the business side of it that we include in our training program. So let's now jump from that to the actual agriculture. So what you talked about, fish and plants. So what we do is we take fish in. Well, let's first talk about soil, because everybody's familiar with soil-based operations. And for the guy with the hydroponics, I'll touch on that in a minute. But soil-based growing in your garden, in pots, in a farm, whatever, we have to ask ourselves, what's the purpose of the soil? And a lot of people say the purpose of the soil is to provide nutrients for the plants.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that's the case, then why do we have to supplement the soil with fertilizer? If it's the soil's sole job is to provide nutrients for the plants.
So let me answer
So
that. Where I think, let me answer that, because what I'm thinking is that because the soil doesn't have enough nutrients, and it enriches or enhances the nutrients in the soil. Look, I'm trying to think like I would, people would think, because that's what I'm thinking.
So if the plant is in the soil, it's sucking the nutrients out of the soil, right? The soil is a medium.
Mm-hmm.
So the plants deplete the soil of the nutrients that are in the soil.
Yes.
So you have to supplement those nutrients back into the soil to make them available for the plants.
Okay.
So it's not the job of the soil to provide the nutrients for the plant.
Okay. So here, going back to high school science again. So the soil has a limited amount of nutrients, or does it have nutrients at all?
It has nutrients if it has organic material in that soil, like desert soil. Does the desert, the sand, does it have organic material, carbon-based material in there that breaks down that the plants can absorb it? No. You dig down deep enough, you go down far enough, there may be soil, but no. But you go to arid soil, you go to very rich soils where it's black versus the red clay soil. I know the South is full of red clay soil,
yes,
right? It's compacted. So how do you amend that soil to convert that red clay soil to a nice rich black soil that's got a lot of rich nutrients in it?
So let me answer that question, because I'm going to talk to you like I'm going to go back and forth with you, because I'm going to tell you what I think I know, and you're going to have to correct me. So when we were little,
Absolutely.
I used to watch my uncles. They still fish. All of my uncles go fishing a lot. So what they would do is go out in the backyard and dig up worms. It used to freak me the hell out. I'm gonna tell you. They would dig up these worms. So I'm like, so going back to your question about the soil, what about the worms and the any kind of insects that live in the soil? Do they not provide the nutrients that the soil needs for the plants? Because that's what I think I learned in science. Help me where I'm wrong.
So now we're getting into it, right? The purpose of the soil is to provide a home to the bacteria.
Okay.
You take organic material, you put it in the soil, and that organic material, the plants can't absorb that organic material in the state that it's in. Something has to break down that organic material and break it down in a molecular state to put it back together in a compound state with the right electronic charge that the plants now can absorb it.
And that's what the worms do, and anything that lives in the soil?
No, the worms do a different job. because
No, I
they
probably got
eat.
a C in science.
No, that's good though. But the worms go through and they provide one aeration because their whole tunnels provide space for the oxygen to get into the soil because oxygenation is really important for the plants because they need oxygen. But they also eat up that organic material and then they through their waste, worm composting and things like that. People do that a lot in beds and stuff. But worms do one thing, but the bacteria do a different thing. So the bacteria break down that carbon material, that organic material that you're throwing in your soil on a molecular basis. They break it down into the right compound structure that the plants can absorb it.
So let me raise my hand. So where does the bacteria come from then? Okay,
So
I got a C in science.
in the soil, bacteria is a natural occurring organism in the soil. But bacteria need temperature at least 70 degrees to be alive. You eat probiotics, you eat yogurt, things like that. Well, the bacteria, it's a cultured, right? Cultured. So you're eating bacteria.
Now you're gonna make
People
me
don't think about that.
Yeah, I don't. I
Okay.
don't think about it like that. Now you're gonna make me never eat it again. But keep talking.
People take probiotic pills and things like that. It's bacteria, but it's in a dormant state. So when it gets in your body, it goes above the 70-degree mark. They wake up, they get down in your stomach and you're down in your intestines, and then they do the job they're supposed to do. Take all that organic material you're dumping down in your stomach, break it down molecularly, put it in the compound state that now your cells can absorb it, gets in your bloodstream, it feeds all the other organs.
Okay. And that's
so
how
that
the
bacteria.
soil works. So that's how the bacteria in the soil works, the same way it will work in your body.
Absolutely.
I might have got a B.
So now what we do to transpose that same science over to aquaponics. So what aquaponics is, no soil. There's no soil involved. I know you're wrinkling your nose. There's no soil involved. Watch this. So we take fish in really large fish tanks. If you're doing a home system and you got a small fish tank, 100-gallon fish tank, whatever, you got 10 fish or whatever, you're going to take that fish and you're going to feed the fish. The fish are going to produce waste. Normally you got to do a water change to keep the water clean and run it through that filtration system. Well, why not do something with that fish waste? Productive. So what we do is we take that fish waste and run it through a multi-stage biological filter, biological meaning bacteria. So we take that fish waste and we use the bacteria to break down that fish waste from the ammonia nitrite to the nitrate that the plants need.
Okay, let me stay there. I'm your best student today.
No, that's perfect.
So going back to everybody growing up, that was just kind of like the thing to do in the 70s and the 80s. People had fish tanks. Like that was like the thing to have a fish tank in your house. And I remember we had one and we would have to clean it. So you're saying instead of taking that water and dumping that water down the drain, that water is nutrient rich. And that water,
Bingo.
Look, I might have passed your class. I might have got a good grade in your class. I would have paid attention. So that water is nutrient rich. And you're saying that is the water instead of soil. That is in place of the soil. That is how you feed the plant.
Correct, but you have to convert that organic material, the fish waste, into a compound state with the right electronic charge to make it available to the plants before you give it to the plants.
So stay there. So the way to make it an electronic charge, do you heat it up? Because just like you said, your body has to be 70 degrees. No, you don't. You're not heating it up. Okay, back me up.
So we're now you're talking biology. Now we're talking chemistry. We're jumping back and forth between biology and chemistry.
I didn't take them at the same time. I took biology,
but it's mixed.
Now you're bringing it all together. So help me to understand this.
Absolutely. So the bacteria in the first stage, there's one type of bacteria. The ammonia is removed. The ammonia just evaporates off of it, and you're left with nitrites. Okay. So I know that's a challenge, but so we're talking chemistry here. So the nitrites, using a different kind of bacteria in the different stage, are converted to the nitrates.
Okay.
Okay, so all of the nutrients and minerals that are in that solution is
Mm-hmm.
all determined by the quality of fish food that you're feeding the fish.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only
Okay.
inject to the system is the fish food.
Okay.
Okay. So now the bacteria does all that conversion. You can get a simple test kit from any of your hardware stores, any of your whole landscape supply stores that tests for pH, ammonia, nitrite, nitrate. Those
Okay.
four basics. So you're testing the water at the different stages of that process to determine whether or not you have true nitrates coming out the back end of that filter.
Okay. If it's converting correctly.
If it's converting correctly. Now, once you initiate a system like this, the bacteria may present itself over time to what I call maturing system, because you have to mature the system. Before the bacteria become present, you have to feed the fish. The fish have to produce waste. There has to be enough waste in that filtration system for the bacteria to begin to grow and to convert it before you can put plants in the system. So those are the stages of activating a system and to begin to mature a system. What I do is to supercharge a biofiltration system. There is a dry bacteria you can get from pond stores, online, that you can, once you start feeding the fish produce the waste, and you got waste now in your biofilter, you add this dry bacteria in, and just like you eating a probiotic, you add that dry bacteria in, boom, now you got bacteria. It doesn't take long for that bacteria to begin to eat that waste and to do what they're supposed to do naturally to start producing those nitrates.
which is the which is the soil, but it's really the water.
Well, the soil is only a medium, remember. It's the same
Yeah,
thing as the biofilter.
y'all. I don't got to see again.
Remember, it's not the soil's job. The soil's job is to provide a medium for all that to happen in.
Okay. All right. Okay. So scratch
So,
get that out of my brain.
so, so imagine if farmers are using the ammonia anhydrous that they typically use for large commercial operations. They inject this harsh chemical into the soil. It kills all those microorganisms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not natural.
Mm-hmm.
So now on the back end of this biofilter in the aquaponics system, now you have the nitrates. If you've done everything right, you have the nitrates coming out. Now you could pump those nitrates to your plants. So the question is now, how do you raise plants in this system with no soil?
Mm-hmm.
So there are some plants that can stand their roots actually sitting in water. So if you know building insulation, the pink insulation board,
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows the pink insulation board from Home Depot or whatever the supply store. So what we do is that insulation board floats on top of the water. You'll have a bed where you create the framing, you use a black rubber liner, or if you have a plastic trough or whatever construction means that you want to do to create this bed or this. I usually make them about a foot deep. I usually make them, to scale, as long and as wide, but they can't be too wide. So you have to be able to reach over and grab your plants and plant plants and harvest plants. So about 4 feet wide, so you can get to either side. There you go. So that's
Yeah.
from my website. That's the system I built at the University of District of Columbia in the greenhouse. And so in these beds, right where the plants are, with this insulation board, some places they call it a floating raft system. Some
Is that
places
this
they
one?
call it a deep.
Is that the
Well,
one with the
keep
black
go.
with
No,
the
keep
black
no. That's just a tray that doesn't even have anything in it yet. Uh, the one where the wood is, where the pipes are,
right here?
right there, that one.
Mm-hmm.
So we took a couple of those trays and we lined all of them with the rubber liner, but we took a couple of those trays, we made those into the floating raft systems with the pink insulation board, and then some of the others we filled with a medium for other kinds of plants. So in the floating raft system, where the roots of the plants actually sit in the water, you have leafy greens, which are your kale, cabbage, spinach, lettuce, all the leafy greens you can plant on those floating rafts, and the roots hang down in the system. planting in those rafts, meaning that you've already, let's talk about germination first before we get into planting. So germination of the seeds. Typically, I don't recommend GMO seeds because there's no need to have GMO seeds if you don't have a harsh environment or pests or threats to the seed. Because the whole reason why GMOs were created is so that your seed could survive given the threats that it's being attacked by. So, heirloom seed or heritage seeds
Mhm.
are the key. Organic, heirloom, or heritage seeds are the key.
Mhm.
And then what we do is we use these rock wool cubes. A rock wool is a medium that's shredded material that doesn't decompose in the water. There's no pH release or contamination of the water by these rock wool cubes. And so the rock wool cubes are about 1 inch square. They come in a sheet of like 96 of them that you lay in a tray. They have a hole in the top, and based on the kind of plant and the seed, sometimes you may only do one seed per hole. Some plants you may do like 3 or 4 seeds per hole, and it also may depend on your germination rate of your seed. Some packets of seed, they give you a percentage of germination rate on the package. You may get 60%, 70% germination rate, whatever, on the package for the seed. So in this tray, in the rock wool, you pour some water in there so that the rock wool absorbs it. You put your seeds in there. In about a 2-week period of time, those plants grow up high enough that now you can break each 1 inch square off and put them actually in the system.
Mhm.
So for lettuce, and all the leafy greens, and once you get them in the system, they normally take about 4 weeks to grow to harvest size.
Mhm.
And
So once
then there
it
are other
germinates,
things you,
so let me back
huh?
up, back you up. So once it germinates, you take that plant because this now has some root to it, right? And
Right.
you put it in those holes where that water that is now able with all these nutrients, this nutrient rich water is it is going to feed the plant, and that's where it grows from, through these little holes that we see on these in these look pipes, these pipe like contraptions that you have.
Well, there's pipes, there's trays. The university wanted to try all kinds of, the students actually are the ones that created those pipes. They wanted to try other types of growing to grow plants. As long as you provide some stability for the plant to grow through, and as long as you allow a base, someplace below the roots for the water to flow through, that you can. So that's the reason why they created those series of pipes. Some places they have what look like rain gutters on your house, flat channels. They call them NFT channels, and the water nutrient solution flows down those channels, and there's holes on the tops of those channels where the plants are planted, and the roots sit down in the channel and absorb those nutrients. So the floating raft system is one type of grow system for plants. Again,
Mhm.
that's leafy greens, that's herbs as well, as long as you're not talking about the heavy bush herbs, but like basil is easy, oregano. There's so many different types of herbs that you can grow in a floating raft bed.
Mhm.
Now, outside of the leafy greens and herbs, the next one we'll talk about is tuber and root plants. So, like turmeric, onions, garlic, uh, tuber and root plants, right? All those tuber and root plants. You ever buy something from the grocery store and your carrot or potato is deformed,
Mhm.
got a dent in it or whatever? Is because when it's grown in the soil, it hits a hard object like a rock or a hardened piece of soil or whatever. It grows around it. So what we want to do is we want to provide a growing environment that has no resistance, that provides the nutrient solution without the tuber and root plant actually sitting in the water, and provides oxygen for that plant and the roots to grow from that plant. So what we did is we used a perlite medium. It's a white, it's foam pieces. They're small, itty bitty. They look like little white rocks. They're real light, but they're very absorbent. They don't break down. And then what we do is we make it a wicking bed, like a sponge, where we run that nutrient solution coming from the biofilter, run that on the bottom of that bed, about a 1 inch deep, and then that bed is filled with 8 inches, 12 inches of that perlite, and it's absorbed up into the perlite. And we plant the plants into the perlite. The roots of the plants then grow into the perlite to absorb all those nutrients with that oxygen rich mix, and it gives the plant now room and space to expand. The carrots are going crazy on this stuff. It's just amazing. Turmeric is going crazy. Onions are going crazy, but they love it. So aquaponics, things grow much, much faster than it does in a garden environment. So that's your
So,
tuber. And,
so let me
so
ask a
that's tuber
question.
and roots.
Uh-huh.
Okay, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, finish your thought, because I don't want you to forget.
So leafy greens and herbs in the one growing medium, tuber and roots in that growing medium. So then the last growing medium is the clay balls. So it's little round clay balls. They may be half an inch big, but it's compressed clay balls, and they're very absorbent, but they don't break down, which is great. And so again, it's a wicking system. We run the nutrient mix on the bottom 1 inch. It's absorbed up into the clay balls. So anything that's not a leafy green or an herb, or it's not a tuber and root, we put in the clay balls. So like your pepper plants, your cucumbers, your tomato plants, your grapevines, your blueberries, blackberries, kiwi, fig. You want to do papaya. You want to do whatever you want to grow. You can grow whatever you want to grow. You want to do tree bearing fruits and nuts, whatever, you can do that too, but you have to provide the right growing environment for the plant and its root system supported in that system. And then the water, after the plants clean the water and absorb all those nutrients, the water gets drained out of those beds, and we drain it into a sump pump basin. The sump pump then pumps it back to the fish by way of a UV filter, a UV light filter. And why do we use a UV light filter? If there are any pathogens, humans, we carry stuff on our hands, right? We don't know where our hands have been all the time. Even if you wash your hands, there's a small chance that you may still have something on your hands. So unless you're using gloves, something, if you touch the system, which is supposed to be biosecure, you may transfer pathogen or something into the system. So all of that water goes through that UV light to sanitize it, to kill the pathogens before it goes back to the fish. So it's a constantly recirculating system. Same water, same flow, goes in, goes out, constantly looping. Cool.
So the water that leaves the plants is relatively clean, though, right? Unless it's been
Absolutely.
contaminated by humans, it's really like clean water.
Absolutely.
Wow. Wow. So how does this look on a very small scale? So say someone has a fish tank in their home and they're like, you know what? This fish tank could be feeding me and my family. Like,
Absolutely.
how do we take the traditional fish tank that we love to see the fish floating around in? How do we take this fish tank model and create something in our own homes that feeds our families?
So the fish tank, what you can buy these off the shelf systems or kits that you can take out of the box, put together, stand up on a stand. And what they normally do is they fish waste pumps right into the grow bed for the plants. On a small scale, that's not too bad of a problem, but if you get a lot of fish, then you'll end up dumping too much ammonia nitrite, and the bacteria won't have a chance to break it down properly for the plants to grow. But on a smaller scale, those systems have worked. Incorporating in an external biological filter may help that process to break that fish waste down more efficiently, to make it more available to plants. So if you want to have your fish tank down on the floor, a pump in your fish tank, pumping the water up to a flat tray that's above on a stand or a shelf or something above that fish tank, or maybe two or three. They have LED lighting systems that you can mount over top of each grow tray, because you're going to have lights, obviously, for the plants to grow if you're doing it in your house or in your basement. And like I said, they have these kits that you can buy that you basically put it together, plug it in, plug and play. You feed the fish, and it starts the whole thing. But if you want to get more advanced than that, and you want to start playing around and designing your own, then you could talk about building a separate rack system of the plants. Multiple racks, and then you have a larger fish tank or maybe multiple fish tanks, and you're pumping that water from the fish tanks into a biological filter that has a air pump in it to oxygenate the water before it goes to the plants. And the plants then drain that water down to, you can have the plant rack above the fish tank, so it drains it directly back down into the fish tank. So that way you're only having one pump in that system. Or
So
if you have a larger racks, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so finish your thought, because I want to ask you, I want to kind of build on what you just said. Go ahead and finish your thought.
So there are simple systems with a one pump system. And then if you want to go bigger, then you may talk about having that water drain into a sump basin. And now you have another pump that returns the water. You have an air pump that pumps the air into that system, into the water where the biological filter is, because it helps the plants and the fish, because the fish need oxygen too. Because everybody who has a tank has a filter pump and has an air pump.
So what I'm seeing, and I'm sure everybody has seen this too. As you scroll social media now, there's these, and I guess those are hydroponics. That's not aquaponics that we're seeing, where you could buy this structure that looks sort of like these pipes that you have already with the aquaponics. It looks like that, but it is hydroponics. So explain to us, let's evolve now into what that is and what we're seeing on the internet, because I've seen it a lot.
Okay, so the difference between hydroponics and aquaponics. Remember, the plant side of aquaponics is hydroponics. So you are raising plants in a soilless environment. That's really what hydroponics is. The difference between the two is where you're sourcing the nutrients. So in a hydroponic operation, it's a synthetic-based liquid nutrient. It's not natural. They take the chemicals, they mix it up in the right proportions from the bottles, put it in the tank. There's dosing valves, there's dosing meters. It's all adjusted. They give the new user of their system the guidelines to set the valves, to set the gauges to the right thing. You got the right flow rate going to the plants. The plants then drain it back to the tank. That's the difference of hydroponics and aquaponics, is where you're sourcing the nutrients for the plants.
And what is the difference in those sources? Because what it sounds like to me, other than the fact that one is natural and the other is synthetic, is, how healthy is the food we're eating? Because ultimately, for me, that would be my question. Like, how healthy is this source versus a natural source?
That's a very good question. So now when people do analytics, they always talk about quantitative and qualitative. So now we talked about quantitative, let's talk about qualitative. So in an aquaponic system, we have very nutrient dense plants. We can show the research papers on that. The rate of growth in the plants is crazy fast, but it's also nutrient dense. But in a hydroponic system, that's not the case, because you're talking about synthetic-based liquid nutrients that go to the plants. It's not, you're missing the micro, because even at the root stem of the plant, there are bacteria that help take that organic material that's supposed to be organic material that's being presented to the plant in the right compound structure, in the right electronic state. There's bacteria at the root stem of the plant that say, hey, I see you, you're in the right state, come on in, be absorbed by the plant. So you're missing the whole microbiology, that microbiome ecosystem that's supposed to happen in the soil that you're replicating in these environments.
So when you say nutrient dense, break that down for people that may not quite understand what you mean.
When you eat fish, what's the purpose of eating fish? What are you hoping to gain?
The nutrients from the fish, right?
Right. So everybody talks about, well, it's omega-3s.
Omega-3s, yes.
Right. So everybody focuses on the omega-3s and the protein levels. The big scare would be like mercury, things like that may be harmful that you might get from fish that weren't raised properly. So you go to the grocery store, look at the fish that we're buying from the regular grocery stores. Where's it coming from?
Who the hell knows? Because they're not telling us.
No, it's
Sometimes it
labeled on
comes
the
from the
label where it's
Atlantic.
coming from.
Sometimes the fish is coming from the Atlantic. I said wild caught Atlantic. I think that's what I look for if I'm buying. So tell me
But
where I'm going wrong.
most people that are on a budget, let me say that. I won't even talk about, people's status on trying to survive. Because outside of you talk about sustainability, let's convert that. Let's talk about survivability. So when we talk about survivability, how can you maintain your existence given your current limitations? If your struggle is trying to improve yourself and trying to bring more income in, you got a certain amount of expenses going out, you got a certain amount of income coming in. If you want to improve yourself, you either lower your expenses or you improve your income, one of the two. So if you can't lower your expenses and you're already at the lowest state, outside of becoming homeless or living out of your car or whatever, you have to improve your income coming in.
Mhm.
So survivability versus sustainability. And I think that helping people understand what's you can buy and what you can afford based on what's on the label. We're importing so much stuff from Asia,
Mhm.
and the standards of these other countries we import stuff is not the standard that we expect here in the United States.
Mhm.
So there is a service that the USDA provides at the ports to inspect produce and agriculture products coming into the United States to make sure there's no bugs, there's no harmful things that could affect the agriculture industry in the United States.
Mhm.
But it doesn't talk about quality standards, because quality standards, that's the FDA.
Mhm.
Because when you talk about regulatory agencies, the USDA handles everything from on the production side. But when you get into processing and packaging, that's the FDA and your local health agency that does the inspection of your processing and packaging facility. So there's that separation of responsibility there. Those standards that we expect here aren't followed across the world,
Mhm.
not at all. So imagine a situation where you have chickens being raised in rows and rows and rows in a warehouse, and all those chicken droppings drop into a large fish tank below, and the fish are eating the chicken droppings as their source of protein.
And we're eating those fish.
And we're eating those fish. Okay?
Hmm.
You see the earthen based big ponds that they raise large quantities of fish on. They
Mhm.
call them farm raised fish and things like that. There's no
Mhm.
air circulation. There's no air pumps. They're not giving them fresh air being circulated. Where is the fish waste being filtered from? There is no pump that's pulling out that fish waste from that pond. The fish are swimming in their own waste, and they throw a whole lot more feed out there for the fish to keep eating. Okay, so that's one. How about these big net fish tanks? They're big nets out in the open ocean or in big lakes, and they have thousands and tens of thousands of fish in these big floating nets. And they feed the fish, all the fish feed from the top, and the fish eat it and then deposit their waste in that ecosystem, in that environment, in the water. Where does all that nitrogen go? Why do we have algae blooms? Why do we have big phosphorus deposits and problems in open water? What? So they're not talking about ecologically, environmentally, how to deal with the waste of these fish. They just, nature will deal with it. But nature has a problem dealing with it. We have a problem in the Chesapeake Bay, right here locally in the DMV, the District, Maryland, Virginia area, in the Chesapeake Bay, from all of the waste from agriculture going out into the Chesapeake Bay. So there's these problems that we have to deal with, and learning how to deal with this, trying to separate our food production industry from our environmental. We shouldn't rely on our environment for producing food. all the trees, the forests they're getting rid of down in Brazil in the Amazon rainforest for livestock, for palm oil, whatever. Why? Why? So farmers are the greatest carbon capture industry globally. Farmers are getting a lot of bad press for producing carbon emissions, but they don't get credit for the amount of carbon they capture in the soil when they have pasture land, when they do cover cropping, when they plant plants, because the more plants you plant, the more carbon you're capturing in the soil. And they control vast acres. So they're capturing that. Imagine doing a livestock operation indoors. So now your carbon emissions from the livestock operation isn't going outdoors, it's staying indoors, and now we can pump those carbon dioxide into the plant production facility, because plants, what do plants breathe? Carbon dioxide. And you got a few workers, the few workers that walk in that facility aren't going to produce enough carbon dioxide for those plants.
But how good is that for the livestock?
It gets rid of the carbon dioxide for the livestock, and the fresh air comes back into the facility for the livestock. And then the waste from the livestock, you harvest your methane gas from that to help power your facility, and the solid waste that's left over is organic fertilizer for soil-based operations. So not all plants should be grown indoors. I'd say human consumable plants indoors. Industrial plants like corn, soybeans, cotton, those kinds of plants, grow them outdoors. Because you're not consuming that food. Use your organic waste or whatever chemicals you want to use, but I don't like using those chemicals because they then leach into the aquifers, they leach into our water supplies, which has already been proven by lawsuits with Monsanto and all of that, the cancer causing problems that those chemicals cost. The reason why you have Bayer, DuPont, all these chemical companies jumping into the agriculture industry, because there's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But now all of our food, unless it's being produced indoors, all of our food has traces amounts of chemicals.
So this aquaponics and having this sustainable way, this is how we can feed ourselves nutrient-rich foods and be healthier, be much healthier. I'm gonna put some comments on the screen. I want you to answer. She says, are the nutrients equivalent to the nutrient plants produced in a farm-like setting?
Okay, so that goes to what we talked about before. What's the role of the soil? So the role of the soil is just a medium. So once the plants suck up, that's the reason why they do crop rotation, corn, soybeans, back and forth, one year to the other, because one puts carbon back in the nutrients, nitrogen back in the soil, and one depletes the nitrogen from the soil. So that's the reason why they do back and forth. That's the reason why they dump animal manure on the soil and mix it in to provide that organic material for the plants. But unless you have the bacteria in there to convert all that in a proper state for the plants to absorb, the value of putting that stuff in the soil is non-existent. That's the reason why a lot of farmers have gone to the ammonia anhydrous, things like that, injecting it directly into the soil. Mm-hmm. So equivalent of the nutrients, if you have the right microbiomes in your soil doing the right jobs, yes, it is the same, because you got animal waste that you're using as fertilizer. We're using that animal waste the same way in our system from the fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he says, do you mean to say that it did not dawn on them that fish have to go to the bathroom? When you were talking about how they create they capture these fish.
Big nets.
Those big nets.
Oh, it does dawn on them. They just don't care.
Yeah, and she says, she answers that whatever makes them money.
Absolutely.
Yep. That was the last one.
Any more questions?
I knew this was going to be good. I have enjoyed talking to you and meeting you and getting to know you, because I have, as I move into this campaign, we only got 4 more months to the United States Senate. We have a primary race to win. And I take such an interest in food, air, water, and land. I mean, all these other policies, we're going to have to work on them and get them right. But when it comes to food, air, water, and land,
don't forget energy.
Energy.
Food, water, energy mix. That's the matrix.
Food, air, water, land, and energy. The 5.
Energy is important. Because without energy, you can't power the aquaponics. You can't. Traditional farming relies heavily on fossil fuels. Let's define sustainable agriculture. How about that? How about a total elimination of fossil fuels in the production, processing, and transportation of all your food? How about a elimination of all chemicals in the production, processing, prep, and transport of your food? How about we reduce the water reliance down to 60%, 60% reduction of our water usage in the production, processing, and transportation of all your food? Let's define sustainable agriculture like that.
And we could do that with aquaponics.
Thank you.
Teaching
So it's about empowering. It's about empowering everybody, everywhere.
Teaching people how to take technology and with agriculture and feeding ourselves something more sustainable and healthy, nutrient rich, as she just asked. We can do this ourselves in our homes.
Right. So the fish tank thing in people's homes, I had opportunity to consult on some large fish tank operations in people's homes. Not even talking about growing food, just a fish tank to eliminate the need for doing a water change. So in the bottom of the fish tank, what I do is I take PVC, small PVC, punch a bunch of holes in it, and then cover that up with all your gravel, at least a thick bed of gravel, right? And then that PVC is being fed up and over the edge of that tank into a filtration system that sits externally, and then the water then from that filtration system pumps over the lip of that fish tank in a waterfall to splash back in. So there's a pump externally and an air pump externally to inject air. And so that gravel bed at the bottom of the tank is your filtration pre-filter that filters that waste. And then you embed plants, live plants, not the fake plastic, live plants in that gravel bed. So they grow and they begin consuming that nitrogen. So there's your plant fish balance. And the water gets cleaned a little bit by the gravel, but mostly by the external filtration system, comes back clean, oxygen enriched for the fish tank. And the only time you got to replace the water is when the water level drops down because of evaporation.
I'm all in. I want to know how to take how to take an ordinary. And I was a child of the 70s and 80s where the fish tank was just the thing to do, like just to have a fish tank. So bringing that back when you have this fish tank in your home, incorporating that with an aquaponic system and actually growing your own food in your own home.
Absolutely. You want to eliminate the LEDs? Do you have a window that you can park it next to? Do you have a sunroom in the back of your house or something? You can do a fish tank with a couple racks on top to make sure there's enough sunlight for the plants. Then you can have one pump that pumps it to those trays. You have to get into what I call creative plumbing a little bit to run that plumbing line from that one pump up to those trays, and then those trays have a drain spout. The drain line then drains right back to the fish tank, and you can grow whatever you want.
So here, look, everybody. So here's gonna be my ask. I know we're almost at the top of the hour. I have so enjoyed this because it just makes so much sense to me, and I have just enjoyed getting to know Mr. Schaefer, his passion for food and these fish, and how this whole look. So here's my ask, Mr. Larry Schaefer. If I can pull a group of people together that will be interested in learning on how to do this in home, could we do like something offline together to start to work on what this could look like on a very small scale in our homes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Somebody who wants to invest some money, who has the equipment, I'll walk it through them with them, and we can use them as a demonstration.
So y'all hear it. We need to come up with, we need to do this on a small scale in our own homes and grow what we eat. Like I eat a salad at least 4 days, at minimum 4 to 5 days a week. I'm eating salads. So I need to grow lettuce and cucumbers and tomatoes, like all my the herbs that I like to sprinkle on. Like I need to grow this in my own home and at least, just for my own consumption. Like And hell,
So
that's probably half my budget right there.
So Tamara, let's talk about business growth, because in the state, as running for a senator, you're talking about the whole state. So let's talk about business now, on the business side of things, for profitability, for us taking things to scale. The minimum size we're talking about. All right, you got it. Nikki, you got it. All right, I'll take you up on that. Tamara will organize it. So taking things to scale for profitability, the smallest size that we're talking about is 10,000 square feet for profitability as a business.
For the big business, because we're talking about in my kitchen right now.
off grid. But we're talking about affecting economies. And the only way you affect economies is by developing new business opportunities for people, establishing new entrepreneurs. That's the reason why I talk about leveling the playing field for everyone to start their own business on this, accessing the loans that are available from the USDA, from the Farm Service Agency, your local representatives, from the local bankers. Once you have a physical asset like land, doing a partnership with a farmer who wants to convert their land into something else, building greenhouses or a fixed open span steel building where you can, number one, control the internal environment, because it has to maintain 70 degrees. You don't want the humidity to go above 60%. And you have to have air circulation and air flow. So if you can do all those things, you can grow aquaponics. So profitability, the smallest scale, 10,000 square feet. If you want to go bigger, all it is just multiples of those 10,000 square foot systems. So imagine a 20,000 square foot facility can produce like $1 million a year profitability. You want to go 100,000 square feet? You want to create like 100, 200 jobs? This is the industry. You want to do it off grid? Then you need more land. You need like 60 acres, 100 acres for your wind and solar. Mm-hmm. You do rain capture. You do rain storage underground. So that way you're not tapping into the aquifer. Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of solutions we're talking about.
I love it. I'm excited. I love it. And you know what? We're gonna talk about this and how Georgia, you hear me, Georgia, how Georgia can do this on a grander scale. Because I've always said that Georgia can feed the world. Like, we have enough land and we need these new opportunities. We could be doing some great things with aquaponics. So you and I are going to be talking much further, but I want to say thank you for being my guest today. This was some good stuff. We all enjoyed it. I was glad everybody was chiming in. This was a lot of great education. When we get that reparations, y'all, here's a whole industry that we could dominate. There it is, how we could feed ourselves.
Come on, Georgia.
Come on, Georgia.
Hey, let's talk about hemp and cannabis industry. How about that?
To grow that.
Seriously, do it indoors. Multiple racks high.
Mr. Larry, you on 10 now.
Let's talk about right.
Level.
Come on.
Well, thank you, Mr. Schaefer, for joining me on this broadcast. It has been a pleasure. Everybody, yes, thank you. We have totally enjoyed you, and we are definitely going to have you back. And you and I are going to continue this conversation around aquaponics. But thank you for joining me today, sir.
Absolutely, because we're on a mission to change the world.
We're on a mission to change the world. I'll see you next week, everybody. Have a good one.
When we come to Washington in this campaign, we're coming to get our check. Young prodigies. Grow. Free. Reparations, Martin said we coming for our check. Reparations, say it loud, 1, 2, mic check. Cream, cash rules everything around me. Dream. My legacy, you can't stop me. Coming for our 40 acres, HR 40 and our paper.
Kicking the door, coming for our 40 acres and more. 6.4 trillion. Miss that no, we fought the Civil War.
We came from the poor. Start from the bottom, we still on the floor. We pray to the Lord. Amen. Picking the cotton, our fingers are sore.
Straight out the underground, escaping from slavery. The only cemeteries that we had were the trees. Watching our bodies while they blew in the breeze. Thinking to the north side to get free.
That way came from slavery. Where's on the mirror once Martin said we coming for our check. Reparations, say it loud. 1, 2, mic check. Cream, cash rules everything around me. Dream, my legacy, you can't stop me. Coming for our 40 acres, HR40 and our
Look,
paper.
we taking them back. Putting Pettis Bridge on the map. Police came with the strap. That Sunday was bloody, no cap.
Stop capping.
Speaking of cap, Kaepernick taking knees at the flag. Where my justice at? We built this nation, better give me them racks. All fat, just imagine a little bit of gasoline. 4 girls got burned back in 63.
400 years, yeah, we still ain't free. I rise, we rise, taking it.
Kaepernick.
Reparations, Martin said we coming for our check. Reparations, say it loud. 1, 2, mic check. Cream, cash rules everything around me. Dream, my legacy, you can't stop me.
Coming for our 40 acres, HR40, and our paper.
We stuck in the trap with no shoes, trying to pull up bootstraps. Increasing the gap. Wealth got bigger, so we had to adapt. Discriminated cause we black. I know it worth more than I know it's a fact. They tryna feel scraps. Strike me on board so we can't come back.
30 years ago on April 19, Yusef and Triremi chemical read.
If it happened to them, think it happened to me. Screaming out ready 5, 2 and free.